You're tuned to 1520 WCHE Radio, and it's time now for the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will offer reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today, and now Sam Hankin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Avid Reader, brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop. So today is the Christmas edition of our show, where we're going to go over the best books of 2014. So all of our Christmas work could not have been accomplished without the stellar efforts of Donna McFadden, our store manager, who puts in long hours doing our newsletter, working with Christine on the website, Facebook, Twitter, our YouTube channel, our podcast, ordering books, managing and scheduling our staff, doing our accounting, upgrading our POS system ad infinitum. Of course, I'm saying this simply because she's sitting here with me. And with that, welcome, Donna. I'm sure you're very happy to be here with me today at the studio.
I'm thrilled. Thank you, Sam.
This does sound like a PBS broadcast.
I think it sounds more like an episode of Saturday Night Live.
Yes. So what should we talk about? Books?
Let's talk about books.
Okay, so I wanted to get out of the way, like the funny ones that have come out recently and also the ones all through 2014. I know Martin Short just came out with one.
I must say, My Life is a Humble Comedy, Legend by Martin Short. You already know, I love Martin Short.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I think I would definitely buy it for myself or for somebody else. And then Amy Poehler, who everyone loves, also has a book out too, right?
Yes, please.
No, well, that's the title. Don't just say yes, please.
That's the book.
And then also Roz Chast, who's my very favorite cartoonist, has a book, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant?
Yeah, I don't know. Would you say that's humor? It's kind of biography, humor.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether to put it in there. It's really funny, but it's really poignant because, you know, all her cartoons are way off the wall, but they're really funny. But this one's also dealing with her mother and father and some of the unfortunate things that happen in their family, and that's why and hence the title. But and then I don't even know who's this other guy, Andy Cohen.
I can't believe you don't know Andy Cohen. I can believe you don't know Andy Cohen. He's Bravo TV, the Real Housewives of every city in America. Yeah, and he's got a book. I actually read his first book. I don't know that as the manager of a bookstore that sells literary fiction, I should admit that. But I think he's really funny. The Andy Cohen Diaries, a deep look at a shallow year. He talks about all of the crazy women that he's met and some of the things that go on the show. So,
okay, that's it for funny books. All right, so you and I, for some strange...
Wait, you missed my favorite one.
Oh, David Sedaris, go ahead.
Let's talk about Diabetes with Owls, which I loved, and I've read everything that David Sedaris has written. Some things I liked more than others. I think this is a little more vintage Sedaris. I thought it was good.
Yeah, and I know, lots of people just, as soon as his books come out, they just collect them immediately. Yes. I know lots of people who do that. Anyway, so let's go to your and my, we seldom agree, but on this one we do, our favorite book of the year, and you can talk a little bit about it.
Well, first of all, seldom is an understatement. We rarely agree on books.
But
we agreed on this one, which is huge. And everyone at the store who's read the book feels the same way. So All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr is just a fantastic book.
Yeah, and I've recommended it, and I've said to people, if you don't like it, just bring it back, and no one does. And the book it starts out, and it's another World War II story and about a German little boy who's unfortunately caught up in the war in many bad ways, and a little girl who's got all kinds of issues herself. And they're separate, and then the chapters go back and forth between them, which sometimes I like, sometimes I don't. But the interesting thing about the book and what draws you in so intensely is the fact that the stories begin to converge, and you can kind of see the convergence, but you have no idea in your mind of how closely tied the two will become and all the ramifications of that. Do you agree about that?
I do. What I really like about a book that successfully goes back and forth between two characters is, you're reading a chapter about one character, and it's coming to a close, and you're a little annoyed because you don't want to go to the next character. You want to keep reading about, in this case, Werner, who's the little boy. And then you go to Marie-Laur's chapter, and you're reading her chapter. And then you get so into her chapter, you're thinking, oh, wait, here comes Werner again. I really want to keep reading about Marie-Laure. So a lot of books will go back and forth, but you'll have your favorite character, and that character is the compelling one, and the other stuff is just fluff in the middle. this book, they're both. I couldn't pick a favorite one. It was great going back and forth between the two because Anthony Doerr does such a great job developing the characters. It's just such a lovely, sweet. Well, sweet probably isn't the right word. It's set during World War II, and they have some really tough experiences. But it's just a lovely book. I can't say enough good things about it.
And it's like, people say a book is profound or actually that it's literature. And I found both of these were true because his language is so precise and so beautiful, it's almost poetic. In fact, there's one line that I can tell whether a book is good if I remember names and lines. And when the little girl this is not a spoiler because it's in all the reviews, she's blind, she's lost her parents, she may have lost her grandfather. They say she's a hero, and she says, I don't think of myself as a hero. I just wake up in the morning and live my life. It is heroic, even though she says it isn't.
Well, that's what makes her so real, though, when you see her and you think that this is who she is. He doesn't make her into be some kind of sappy heroine. She just is this sweet girl trying to get through a really tough time.
Yeah, she's totally integrated, She's totally integrated in her mind, and she is what she is, and that's it. And she has tasks that she has to complete, and she knows what she has to do. Whereas he, as he's told by his best friend, all the things all the things you could have been. In a really nice way, the guy says it, but he can't become what he could be because of the war.
Right. It sounds like hers is kind of the sad story. He's the one that, my heart really went out to because Marie-Laure has people in her life who love her and take care of her, and Werner he has some of those people, but not to the degree that she does.
And he's lost the people he had, and he has all this prodigious talent and goodness inside of him that's kind of trampled on by Nazi Germany. Anyway, okay, so I'll do one, then you do one, okay?
Okay.
Well, so The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell is this book that is half fantasy, half reality, and he was told before he wrote the book that that's an impossible thing to do. But it works really, really well because the fantastic is kind of woven like a skein throughout the book, like a golden thread through a tapestry or something like that. He's also the author of Cloud Atlas, which is one of my favorite books. But the Bone Clocks, and a lot of these people I interviewed him, and he's won all kinds of awards. Time Magazine voted him one of the most 100 influential people in the world. He's very unassuming. It's funny because he has a stutter, but during the entire interview I never even noticed it. But when I listened to it a little bit afterwards, you can hear it. And his favorite movie is The King's Speech. But he's a wonderful person, and his writing is sublime. So that would be another one that I put way up there.
Sometimes you can like a book even more, I think, when you find out a little bit about the author. Like, I felt that way about David Foster Wallace. It's like, wow, I like this book, but wow, when I get his whole story, I really like this book. And I think David Mitchell is kind of like that.
Yeah, and especially I'm lucky enough to be able to actually talk to them as real people. And sometimes it changes my entire view of the book.
The books, it hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but I loved it, is The Farm. Tom Rob Smith is a mystery writer. I finished the book, and I was trying to ask myself, or I did ask myself, what is the about this book that reminded me of Gone Girl? And I finally realized it's a he said, she said kind of story. But I don't want to take anything away from Gone Girl, if there's probably 3 or 4 people out there yet who haven't read the book. I just thought it was executed even better. He's just really good at keeping you guessing. You don't know where it's going. And I recommended it to someone else in the shop, and she liked it. Her word for it was creepy. It does have a bit of a creepy feel to it. It's one of those, Nordic mysteries that's kind of dark and, but executed in a great way. And the other thing, because this is the thing that it comes down to for me is, what's the ending like? Because you can be so into a book and then they slap on this Hollywood ending and it just ruins it. I love this book because I didn't know where it was going, and I thought the ending was perfect. And I think I'm with most people here. I didn't feel that way about Gone Girl.
Yeah, and I guessed Gone Girl halfway through. And, and I taught, what's her name again?
Gillian Flynn?
Yeah, and I interviewed her. She was a very, very nice person, and it changed a lot of the way I felt about the book, but still, I'm not going to see any movie with Ben Affleck in it, so that's going to...
And I will.
Yes. Well, and the other thing is we're going to talk a little bit about Nell Zink in a few minutes in her book, The Wall Creeper, but we were talking when I interviewed her about how some people like the ends of their books kind of wrapped up in a box with a bow.
Yes.
And I don't like that at all. I want to be thrown all over the place, and I want, as a reader, to be put to work at the end and trying to figure out what happened, what's going to happen. Do I want to find out what happens? And she agreed with that.
And as you know, we make lots of recommendations for people. That's why a lot of people come into our store. They want to know, what should I read? And that is one of the most important things to find out. What kind of books do you read, and what kind of ending do you like? Some people have to have a happy ending. And I rarely like a happy ending because it rarely feels genuine. You don't have to have a miserable ending where everybody gets wiped out, but life is rarely all neat, tied up in a bow, which reminds me of one of the books on my list that you didn't like.
What, Lucky Us?
Lucky Us, yes.
Pretty good guess.
Yeah. And I would agree with you.
By
Amy Bloom.
Yeah.
I just really liked it. Maybe it was because I read it on vacation. Sometimes when you read a book is as important as what you're reading, but...
Yeah, I liked the book a lot. I just didn't feel that the characters would come together in the way they did at the end. I didn't seem, time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that happening other than that one photograph.
And I would agree with that. That was maybe the weakness of the book. But all in all, I really liked that book.
And do you think it was just a happy ending and that was the end? Because I didn't want it to be. I wanted there to be still conflict, and it didn't seem like there was. It was just the end.
Yes, that's the way it was. And I wonder, this is the question I would ask a lot of authors is, does deadline affect how you end your book a lot? Sometimes it just seems like this wonderful book, and then, boom, they had to end it.
Well, that's what happened in Gone Girl. I'm almost 100% sure.
Yeah, it seems like that in a lot of books.
Are you talking about one, or am I talking about one now?
What were you talking about for Lucky Us? I forget.
Okay, let's talk about Nell Zink, the Wall Creeper.
Okay.
Nell Zink is this author who was totally undiscovered. What she used to do is write novels and send them to the one person she wanted to read them. And she's considered mysterious, but I interviewed her and she said she's sick of people telling her that. But she wrote this one book. Well, there's another book called Mislaid, which isn't out till May, but you can already pre-order it on Amazon, not to use the A word. But
you can also pre-order at Wellington Square Bookshop.
True, because you can. Yes, you can. You can order. Yes, order it through us. In any event, so that book is coming out, and she said she got an advance that was 666 times as much as she got for her book, The Wall Creeper, which is a small format book published by a very small publishing house that only publishes 12 books a year or less. And it's a very, very strange book, and it's like I said, it's small format. You can if you had big back pocket, you could put the book in that pocket, and it's just very strange. And after you read 3 pages, you'll either put it down, throw it away, or you'll say, "Wow, this is the coolest book I've read in a long time." So, what do you think about it? You're not done though.
No, full disclosure, I have not finished it yet, and I have to say I expected not to like it because we don't like the same books, and this is it's a totally different book than All the Light We Cannot See. But it made me think. One is, I don't think we can talk about books in 2014 without mentioning The Goldfinch.
I was just going to say that.
I am also still reading The Goldfinch. The difference between Wall Creepers and The Goldfinch is I can't wait to get back to Wall Creepers and find out what's happening. The Goldfinch is a little bit of work. I feel like it's a chore.
Well, there were 2 books this year that were chores. The Goldfinch and the Luminaries. So anyway, yeah, the Goldfinch and the Luminaries, it's like people picked either one or the other generally. And one of my ex-wives read the Luminaries, and she loved it, but was so inaccessible for me. But many people loved it, whereas the Goldfinch, I didn't like it that much, but it won
the Pulitzer
Prize, and I just didn't see it like Donna was just saying. It's not like she was drawn back to it as she is to the books we've talked about in these few minutes.
Well, it's funny because the Goldfinch, Gone Girl did this as well. People come into the store. People who've read the Goldfinch most people have a very strong opinion on it. Lots of people didn't like it. Lots of people thought it was too long. Lots of people loved it. So it's just one of those books that makes people think, makes people talk. To me, that's a great book, a book that makes people talk. Whether you like Gone Girl or not, it got people talking. And people were giving their friends a book saying, here, you got to read this so we can talk about it afterwards. The difference with the Goldfinch is your friend could spend a lot of time before finishing the book, before the 2 of you can discuss it, because it's just so long.
Well, that's what makes, we have our book clubs and other book clubs that meet at the store. And Goldfinch is, don't you think it's like the perfect book for a book club discussion?
Well, except that it's really long.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't read a book that long.
That's true.
But, I mean, I love the way Donna Tartt writes. I think she's a great writer. I really liked The Secret History. But again, I'll go back to The Wall Creepers. Is it The Wall Creepers
no,
or Wall
it's just
Creeper?
The Wall Creeper.
The Wall Creeper. I should know that. I do want to, and it's not a book for everyone. That's the other thing I try to kind of suss out when I'm talking to people. Because it's a little...
Graphic sexually.
Yeah, not incredibly graphic, but pretty graphic.
You
And a little finished it. Okay. A little racy, so not everybody wants that. But it's, I'm interested in these people. They're quirky, they're fast-paced, they've got things going on, they're talking about real things, they're interesting. So that's why I wanted to keep reading the book.
And then I'll do one. This is really strange because it's called The Martian, and I just read it because I love science fiction. Well, I don't love fantasy so much, but I love science fiction. Has a great cover. Also, we talked about this before, but everyone says you can't judge a book by its cover, but as Donna and I both know, everybody who comes in judges books by their cover. And that's why it's nice that we can make recommendations, unlike Barnes & Noble and some of the other big box stores, the ones that are left. But it's a really good story. The Martian is actually an Earthling who ends up on Mars stranded. And I just was looking at the indie picks, the IndieBound, the Independent Booksellers Association books, and it's like climbing up the charts. So I would highly recommend it it's almost like young adult. So I would highly recommend it for any 15, 16, 17-year-old kid that really loves science fiction. So that's mine.
Do you think a lot of science fiction is kind of young adult, or just this one is
I don't know. I mean, it's like nowadays if you go to Barnes & Noble, half the science fiction is Star Trek or Star Wars, and I don't even consider that anything. I don't consider that worthwhile reading. But every once in a while, look at the other thing is, how many dystopian post-apocalyptic books do you think we have in the store other than cat and dog books?
Well, a lot. But the funny thing is, everyone talks about The Hunger Games and then Divergent and The Maze Runner, but it all started with The Giver, and the movie version of The Giver came out after all that stuff. So people are sort of like, oh, The Giver, young kids, and I have to keep pointing out to them, no, this is where it started. Certainly it's not the first of the kind, but she did such a great job making it accessible for young kids.
Yeah, it's like when I went to see Mockingjay by myself the other day at 11 o'clock in the morning. Every single trailer was a movie about a post-apocalyptic world, or a world in which we were like Interstellar, which is an absurd movie because nothing in it could really happen. But it's about, going out, finding a new place for us to live, or the world has ended, and like The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And for some reason, I had a discussion with someone about why it's so important for kids, especially. They're sick of this planet. They're sick of the way things work, and they're longing for something different. And maybe it's the idea of everything ending and starting anew that is what attracts them.
And there are actually, some really good books coming out that have come out for that genre. I know we were talking about science fiction, but even like The Magician's Land and The Slow Regard for Silent Things, we have a couple of teenagers, very well-read teenagers in the shop. I know Evelyn couldn't wait for Patrick Rothfuss to come out with A Slow Regard for Silent Things, which is part of his trilogy. And James Fry, Oprah's nemesis, his book is getting a lot of, and it's already been optioned for a movie, is getting a lot of attention. I haven't read it, and I haven't talked to anybody yet who's read it, Endgame, so I'm just wondering if it's any good. So if anybody knows. Oh, this isn't a call-in show, right? No one can call in.
Oh, I can't say that. You don't know it's not pre-recorded,
It's not, but we're not taking phone calls at this time.
Correct. So is The Goldfinch going to be a movie? Is it optioned? Because it would make a better movie than a book, I think.
Yes, they'd cut a lot out of it. But it would make a great movie.
It would. If they cut like 600 pages out of it.
Yeah.
Because it's a good story.
Yes. Yes, it is a good story. How are we on time? Because I have a lot of books that I still want to talk about.
Go ahead.
So the next fiction book I wanted to talk about came out in hardback early in the year. It's coming out in paperback December 2nd. It's called The Storied Life of A.J. Fikri. If The Wall Creeper isn't your kind of book, maybe The Storied Life of A.J. Fikri is. I really liked it. It's a sweet story. You should read it, Sam. The A.J. Fikri is the owner of a bookstore, and it's his whole life, and I won't give it away. But he relates, he's telling his daughter some things, and he's relating things that he's telling her back to short stories or back to books. And it reminded me a little bit of The Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. Kind of has that feel-goodness to it, but a little bit of meat. It's not just a completely sappy kind of, what's the TV network that does all those sappy romantic movies?
I don't know. The Hallmark Channel?
Yes, exactly. It's not like a Hallmark Channel, but I think that'll be a big seller because I would recommend it to people. I think it's a nice book to curl up with by the fire.
I like books that tie together life or a specific life back to either literature or something that anchors them to something in writing, or even if it's spiritual. spiritual. I don't care. As long as it's a combination of the two. Because it gives you a really good perspective on life, I think.
And I wanted to go and look up all these books. I'm like, oh, wait, I haven't read that book. It made me want to go even further into books. So I liked that one. I also am reading, I think most people who read a lot probably read more than one book at a time. I'm reading like 4 books. One of the books I'm reading too is Lila, the Marilyn Robinson. That's the 3rd book in her trilogy, Gilead. I like it. I have to say it started out a little slow. It's selling, I don't know what it is on the bestseller list now. It's in the top 5. So I could recommend that too. I'm eager to get back to that and see what else is happening in that next. So I would definitely tell people to check that out.
You know, it was funny when you're talking about Evelyn and books that kids like. Isn't it nice when you go, if you come into our bookstore and you go to the back where you can just sit down and hang out and have coffee or hot chocolate now, and you just see kids that are, what was she reading? The one girl's reading Moby Dick or something?
Yes.
And then they were, what else? There was another book. You see kids who are like 15 years, we have a 15-year-old employee who's incredibly well-read, Sierra, and it's just, owning a bookstore, an independent bookstore, is a difficult job, as Donna can attest because she does all the work. But I mean, it's a difficult job. It's really hard today, but it's well worth it when you see somebody come in. You know, as I've said several times on the show, some 12-year-old kid coming in wanting to buy War and Peace, or you see some girl with her legs tucked under her in one of our easy chairs reading Moby Dick or something like that. And it pretty much makes it all worthwhile to me.
It does. And whether it's kids or even adults, talking to the customers and I get so many book ideas and recommendations from our customers. It's fantastic because if you love books, that's what you want to do is stand around all day and talk about books.
It goes either way, too. Like, if we love books, like with The Light We Cannot See, I mean, I've recommended it to so many people because I want them to read it. And that's not something that ever happened or can happen at Barnes & Noble. And I think that's what's great about an independent bookstore, too, is that there's so much interfacing between the customers and us. Is it your turn?
It's my turn. It's your turn, but I have a question. I forgot to write down the name of the book we were just talking about, the children's book, 26 Ways to...
Oh, yeah.
Is it 26 Ways to Skip School?
Yeah.
What a great book. It's kind of a children's book, but not really a children's book. But
it's shaped like a children's book.
Yes.
And the illustration is absolutely beautiful, and it's just a little story with one word on each page by the alphabet, so it goes A, B, C, D, about how you can skip school. And the thing about some of these children's books is that kids don't like reading a lot of words when they're young. And if the illustrations are really good, like in graphic novels, if the illustrations are really good, sometimes one word a page is more than enough to awaken a kid's imagination or to delight them or to make them ask questions to their parents. And I think it's like they always said, if it's more than 7 words on a billboard, you're not going to read it. And I think if you write a lot of words on a page, kids aren't going to read it, right?
I would agree. Although if the pictures are beautiful enough, they'll just keep looking at it. We have that whole wall up front with Zelinsky is the main author of all of those fairy tales that are just beautiful.
I know, they are beautiful.
I want all of them. They're just so pretty. But yes, I would agree. It is all about... last year there was a book that came out, Journey, and Aaron Becker, and he has a new one out this year. Although I just don't think he can top Journey. No words. It's all just watercolor pictures, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice when you have, like my granddaughter Kenzie, she's 2 now, and my son Michael reads to her every night, and I always kind of make fun of, and my grandson James, he's 7 months old, and Katie's reading to him every night, and I think, well, they can't really understand it, but I think it is important, and I think Kenzie's to the point now where these books that don't have any words, that have the pictures, are great for pre-readers. They get to turn the pages, they get to see them.
Yes, absolutely. It gets you interested, it gets the kids interested in a book. The name of the book is Eerie Dearies, 26 Ways to Miss School. It's Rebecca Chaperon.
It's great. I just read. It was in the back room of the bookstore, and I just picked it up and just read the whole thing and looked at the whole thing in 10 minutes, and it made me laugh. It makes you kind of feel sad. Yeah, that's it too. It makes kids have emotions.
Exactly. It brings up a range of emotions, and I think they can start. Maybe they're not connecting the dots, but the pictures are bringing up emotions. There's a feel to each of the illustrations and each of the drawings, and I think that's important.
So anyway, to close that, we have tons of really, really good kids books and young adult books. We have a young adult book club, and we have tons of really good Christmas board books and stuff like that. But going back to like the books for the adults, if any of them are listening to this, James McBride, who's the guy I also met and had a great talk with and interviewed him, he wrote The Color of Water, which is this classic book, and he also wrote The Good Lord Bird, which actually won the National Book Award. So I'm kind of proud of the fact, too, that we've interviewed, thanks to Donna and Rebecca and Christine, we've interviewed 3 of the past 4 Pulitzer Prize winners.
I would have to say,
Rebecca?
I don't get any credit for that.
No, you don't. I was just trying to be nice.
No.
So 3 of the last 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, and I think 2 of the last 3 National Book Award winners, and maybe some of the, what am I thinking, Man Booker.
I think if we had better memories, we would know exactly how many.
Well, I mean, it's 160. I've interviewed 160 authors. It's really hard to do that. But anyway, so what I was saying was James McBride, Good Lord Bird, which won National Book Award, is an excellent book, and I would put that again in the top 10. He has a great way of telling a story, and it's based on the fact, and I found this with a lot of authors, that they spend a year or 2 or 3 years actually researching the book, which is really hard.
And that paperback, it came out in paperback this year.
Right. But then Nell Zink said she wrote the book in 3 weeks.
Well, then we can talk about Stan later, because he I don't think there is an editing process. I think he just writes, and then it all comes out. But that also, my mind is jumping around again. It's the caffeine. But The Good Lord Bird coming out in paperback made me think of another book that's out in paperback this year, was released in paperback, that I absolutely have to talk about, which is The Sun by Philip Myers.
Oh, yeah.
It's like on the scale of A Lonesome Dove, or kind of, I know these authors work so hard, I never want to like insult someone. It's James Michener, but even more literate than James Michener.
But it's sweeping. It's a sweeping drama.
It's an epic. If you like historical fiction and you want to read a really well-written book, it's a lot. I mean, it's one of those books that has the family tree in the front, so you can keep everybody straight because there are a lot of characters. But it's really well written, and just I think it's a great. I see this book wrapped up under the Christmas tree because there's somebody out there who likes this kind of book, and if you get this book for them, they're going to be so happy because it's a great book. It's
a perfect book for a certain kind of person,
exactly.
and if you're a good giver, good present giver, then you know who that person is. And I interviewed this guy too, and he acted like it was no big deal. He acted like
it's a big deal.
Yeah, I know.
That kind of book is a big deal. But yes, if your dad likes James Michener, get him The Sun, and I think he'll love it.
Oh, you know what I wanted to mention, even though I don't know anything about the book, is we just got Foxcatcher in.
Yeah.
And now the movie's out now with Steve Carell and all.
I have to be honest. Rarely do I say the movie may be better than the book, but I don't know. I was kind of looking through the book, and I'm eager to see the movie.
Well, he's going to win. He'll win the Academy Award, I think.
I hope so.
I think he will.
But
Well, so some of the other books that came out this year, real quick, and then Donna can name some too. I'll just go through these really quick because we only got like 10 minutes left. So, The Universe in the Rearview Mirror. Most of these guys I interviewed, which is basically science for nerds, which is perfect for me. Then Station 11, which is another post-apocalyptic book, which is like winning, is long listed for something.
She's won a lot of awards that we can't remember.
I don't know.
Important ones, though.
Yeah. And then there's a new William Gibson called The Peripheral, Undeniable by Bill Nye, which is a great book to explain to nitwits who don't believe in evolution why evolution exists. Henry Kissinger has a book out called World Order, which would be interesting, although kind of anathema to me as well. And then the book that I guess is our book club pick next month, the paperback version of The Path Architect.
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that one?
That's a kind of book where everyone who's read it has really liked it. That's another one of those books that kind of crosses different people. Usually there's a book and a type of person that fits that book. But I want to talk about Flash Boys, Michael Lewis. I loved that book. It's about the high-frequency traders. It's nonfiction. Michael Lewis wrote Moneyball and a bunch of other stuff. I love the way he writes nonfiction. It's just so compelling. And I'm not really that into the whole how the stock market works, and I just loved it. It was, first of all, I can't believe that this was going on and why people aren't more upset about it and why it isn't getting more attention. But he just makes it so interesting, even explaining the tough stuff for someone who doesn't really like to read about math and tough stuff. So that's a great book. I would highly recommend that. The Boys in the Boat is now out in paperback. If you are, again, one of the 3 people who hasn't read either Gone Girl or Unbroken, you absolutely need to read that. Unbroken is finally out in paperback. And the YA version of Unbroken just came out. I'm going to buy that. I have a 13-year-old, and we're going to read that because it's a great book. It's an important book. It's something to talk about. There's so much that goes on in this guy's life. Obviously, the adult version of the book, there's a lot. He's going to prison camp and left at sea and all those.
Is that movie out yet?
The movie comes out, I think, Christmas Day.
That would be a good one to read before you saw the movie.
Absolutely. Read the book before you see the movie.
Didn't he just die?
Yes, he did. I forget how old he was. Very, very old.
But I like those books that, like The Boys in the Boat and Unbroken, and books where, there's triumph, but there's also this incredible heartache. And sometimes they're hard to read, too.
It can be hard to read. That's why I'm looking forward to reading the YA version and just seeing how she's adapted it for a different audience, because it was a really tough book to read. While we're talking about movies and things like that, The Red Tent is being made into, or has been made into a miniseries, which comes out in December. If you haven't read The Red Tent by Anita Diamond, you should get that. You absolutely want to read that before you see it. It is a fantastic book. What else did I want to throw out there? My Salinger Year by Joanna Rakoff. Going to be reading that next. Rebecca read that and said it was fantastic. This intern spends a year working for J.D. Salinger, and
I saw there was a documentary about Salinger when that biography came out, and she was in it a lot, and must have been incredibly strange experience.
An incredible experience, and it sounds very interesting. Also, the Roosevelts, talking about miniseries and books. We've got it in book format. It's a beautiful book. Another perfect present for the history lover. It's just really, really great.
Yeah, we have a lot of biographies, more than most stores, and there's a lot of people who love them. I really do like them. Sometimes it's hard for me to get into them. It's like Mark Twain's autobiography.
And Rebel Yell that has been selling, but it's Andrew Jackson. But that's another one. They're all the well-written ones are so well-researched, and there's so much information that I think that can be intimidating to people.
Plus, I think people are turned off when you see like 20 biographies of Albert Einstein. But I think
we've got the good one.
What was the one you were talking about that was the Moneyball guy?
Michael Lewis, Flash Boys?
Yeah, I interviewed this guy who wrote The Fourth Revolution. He's the chief editor of The Economist magazine. And he talks about how we don't have enough time to go into it, but he talks about how there's been 3 revolutions in the world with regard to economic conditions, and that we're now coming upon the 4th revolution, and America is not really involved in it. Countries like Singapore and Finland are now being copied with regard to their economic systems, whereas our country used to be the one that was the model for how a capitalist economy should work. That was a fascinating book, too, and we had a really interesting interview where I kind of argued with his premise, but The Fourth Revolution. And then the other one I interviewed was The Most Dangerous Book, which, again, is kind of like a slim audience, but it's all about James Joyce Ulysses. And it's fascinating because it contains Judge Wolseley's opinion, and it goes through the very, very lucky things that happened that allowed that book to be published in the United States, especially through the efforts of Bennett Cerf. We got like 3 or 4 minutes left.
Okay. Then I have to go through some children's books. Winter Bees and Other Poems of the Cold by Joyce Sidman and Rick Allen. I love this book. It's poems on one side. The other side is nonfiction information about different animals that hibernate. The illustrations are beautiful. I actually am going to buy this book. My youngest child is 13. I'm buying this book because I want this book. Little Pear Tree, just a cute little board book with flaps to lift up, also very cute. There's a book called Wonderment, which has 6 short stories, perfect for the holidays. The Nutcracker, The Gift of the Magi, How the Camel Got His Hump, are just a few of them. Really nicely done, nice version of it. The book looks beautiful. Another book, children's book called What Forrest Knows, which is just beautiful to look at. I have to talk about our friend Jen Bryant's book, The Right Word, Rojanus the Thesaurus. She always has the same partners with the same illustrator, Melissa Sweet, and their books are absolutely beautiful. And I finally have to say, if you have a Percy Jackson fan in the house, you probably already know the latest version, The Blood of Olympus, is out by Rick Riordan. And if you haven't gotten them, the big coffee table-sized book, Percy Jackson's Greek Gods, that is a perfect Christmas present because it's gorgeous. I'm looking through it. I actually bought it for my nieces, and your kid kid will spend a lot of time looking through this book, reading about all of these Greek gods. Riordan does a great job. The illustrations are beautiful, the pictures are beautiful, and the stories are fantastic. That is a book that a kid could pick up for years, every night, and flip through it at bed. It's just,
when I was a kid, that would have been the perfect book for me. And we have a couple of them wrapped up, and then one standing out. But the thing about it is that I like is there's this incredible sense of humor that runs through the book.
Yes.
He makes fun of the gods, he makes fun of the stories, and it's so accessible because of that. So when you're reading it, it's not like reading Bulfinch's mythology, although I love that too, but it's like reading a book that kind of like brings the gods down to size. And
it's entertaining.
It's fun.
Yeah, as much as you want your kids to read Dolaire's or whatever, it's entertaining. So I think that's a great book. And that also reminds me, though, just the size of it, of all of the Game of Thrones books that are out. Beautiful coffee table sized books. There's a couple new. We were talking mysteries, so I mentioned The Farm, but I also wanted to mention Louise Penny.
All right, before we finish, because I got.
Wait, I didn't get to talk about cookbooks.
No, we can have another.
Plenty more.
No.
A Kitchen in France.
That one year in France. Okay, so anyway, next week we're going to have a local author, Stan Warren, who we briefly mentioned.
The Wars of the Roses.
And he is great. His books are better than... Anyway, thanks for joining us.
We love Stan.
And we'll talk to you soon next week when Stan's here with us. And
Sam, thank you so much for having me on. This was a pleasure.
Likewise, it was fun.
You've been listening to the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will be back next week with reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today.